This is Dave Raetz, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I've got my friend Dave on the show. One of the things that it's great about having a show that you get to do yourself. Sometimes I'm talking to world famous people. Today's podcast episode will be Matt Hoy. He sings backup in UB40, has his own chart topping songs, you know. And then sometimes you have people on that just do incredible things that benefit all of us. And Dave is one of these people where he has a job that you probably don't think of like if you were to guess the 100 jobs, you probably would never guess his job as something that you would do. And yet here he is. And then when you go out and you watch him do his job, he does it with you. It's really a wonderful, wonderful human experience to do it. So Dave, why don't you briefly introduce yourself, tell us where you work at, and then we'll just dive on into the conversation.
Okay. My name is Dave Raetz. I'm the Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for an environmental nonprofit in Orange County, California, called the Irvine Ranch Conservancy. And
when you say that, let's talk about how much land we're talking about in this conservancy, because basically you guys basically run a nature park, I guess would be a good way to say it in layman's terms.
Yeah, what's interesting about it is we actually don't own any land at all. The land is owned under public ownership, like the county or various cities have parcels and things like that. But we're kind of that private partnership arm that allows us to do a lot of things that these agencies couldn't do on their own. So it's really an interesting thing. Right now, we are actively involved in managing almost 40,000 acres in Central Orange County. Which is a lot. Like most people don't even think there is open space areas in Orange County. You know, they're like, oh, there's beaches in Disneyland, right? And there's actually a tremendous amount of open space in Orange County, particularly Central Orange County down into South Orange County. And we focus heavily within what it was known as the historic Irvine Ranch, which the Irvine family owned. It was like a 93,000 acre ranch that went from the base of the Santa Ana Mountains all the way down to the beach. And like a lot of cities came out of that, Newport Beach, the city of Irvine, obviously, and a few various other ones that kind of on the borders of it.
How big is 40,000 acres? I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, I've got a ranch and you can point at all this stuff, you know, but how big is 40,000 acres? It's
funny because I've taken people out on hills and stuff, and I'm like, we're right here and you're seeing all this, you think it's great. I'm like, and it goes over that mountain and that mountain and that mountain and that mountain. And then way over there, you see that hill? That's still part of it. And that's a common occurrence that we, because I mean, it really is massive. Now, what we're talking about is we actually function in, we're talking Orange County, which is one of the including Los Angeles, one of the most urbanized areas in the world, right? And so we're talking islands of open space. So it's two big chunks, each about 20,000 acres each.
Right.
So it's, you can somewhat see the ends of it because it's completely surrounded by urban development. So
but it's a big space. And what is the highest altitude? Do you know what that is?
Well, the kind of the interesting things that we a lot of the areas that we manage are actually on the northern end of the area is at the base of the foothills of the Santa Ana Mountains. So, once it gets to the Santa Ana Mountains, it turns into Cleveland National Forest. And that actually has, peaks that go up pretty high. Like you get into some of you get conifer forests up there and things like that, where we're more on the lower level areas. But, I think we have some areas that we manage that are up in the 3,000 foot level.
Okay. Yeah.
The majority are kind of lower, around 1,000 feet.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, like, what's the lowest level? Because you guys don't hit the water, do you?
Well, yeah, we have stuff that's actually down by the beach. Like we manage a parcel this will surprise people too, but in Corona Del Mar, Newport Beach, we actually manage a parcel known as the Buck Gully Reserve, and it's an urban canyon that is preserved, and it drains out onto the beach. So we're at sea level too. And then we do a lot of work in Crystal Cove as well. We're doing some large scale habitat work in Crystal Cove State Park, which is right on the shore, So we're all over the place.
And then as you guys manage these things, there's that and maybe talk about this. There's preservation and there's conservation,
Yeah.
and the different modes and goals of these things. Can you kind of give us a real quick explanation on that?
Yeah, so when you're talking about conservation, there's many ways to do it, and the properties that we're working on, they've been saved or preserved, right, in many different ways. In 1996, in Southern California, particularly Orange County, there was a habitat preservation plan. It was known as the Natural Communities Conservation Plan, and then that's the federal one, and then the state one is known as a habitat conservation plan. And these are legal binding agreements with with the landowners, whether it's a public or private landowner, and how these lands are going to be preserved, and it's legal agreements with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and California Fish and Wildlife. So those are like set legal preservation things. And essentially the reason why it came about was Orange County in the 90s, as the economic development was going on, they kept running into problems with, developing Orange County and continuing that engine of economics to go through the area. And anytime they try to expand and develop, they would run into environmental issues, mainly the Endangered Species Act. And they would do, the developers would do all the things that they needed to do, and then they would get their permits, and then they would move, do their work, and then they'd go on to the next project. All of a sudden, the next project would have, they do the same things from that other project, but there'd be another endangered species that get thrown into the mix, and another one, and another. And so it really ground to a halt this whole economic engine that was trying to develop Orange County, and which is super important from a financial standpoint for the county. And so the Natural Communities Conservation Plan was actually an agreement that focused, instead of on the individual species, it focuses on the habitat of that species. And it was an effort to try to preserve large chunks of these habitats in order to protect these endangered species, but everything else that's there as well. And so it was kind of a compromise that between, the developers and then the conservation or preservation organizations and agencies that make those things happen. And in my opinion, in Orange County, it's been very successful. It's been around since 1996. These plans have, what the existing conditions were, what the future desired conditions are, and how do you balance all of that kind of stuff. How do you balance the urbanization versus the functionality of these ecosystems to make sure these species survive and function over time? And because we're talking about, we're not talking Yellowstone where there's thousands of acres of backcountry that wild stuff just happens. We're talking about urbanized wilderness areas that exist right along some of the most urbanized areas. So that urban wild interface is really important, and it's interesting. Another way that preservation has happened as well in some of the areas is they're known as conservation easements. So prior to us managing these lands, the Nature Conservancy was here doing it. And the Nature Conservancy is an international, nonprofit conservation group, and they came in and they were managing the properties for almost 20 years. And in that process, areas of the property that were not protected under the Natural Communities Conservation Plan were then protected by the Nature Conservancy, which is known as a conservation easement. And essentially the landowner gave the developmental rights to that land to the Nature Conservancy, and they want to preserve it. And then once they did that, they were like, okay, it's time for us to move on to different projects. And that's where we came in and kind of showed up on the scene to fill that void of once they were leaving the area. But they still have rights. They still own the rights to certain lands. The land is owned now by public agencies, but they still say as to what happens with that land. So many mechanisms on how you do this.
Right. So there must always be a pull to develop some of this land as well. I mean, some of this land is right on the edge of canyons that could be wonderful multi-million-dollar homes, high tax producing homes, right?
Yeah, that is the one thing that's kind of where we are in Orange County now is really the kind of the build out particularly in central Orange County is almost done. So kind of that fight between, environmental activists and developers is almost over. I don't consider, I'm not an environmental activist. I work in the environmental field. I think activists are necessary. I think they need to do their, what the things that they're going to do. And I think they've accomplished a whole lot of stuff in Orange County. and I'm not opposed to them, but I'm not one to go stand in front of a bulldozer. I'm a practicing conservationist. So.
Right. And then you're the agent of preservation and conservation, and you're also balancing keeping this space accessible to humans as well as native species, and trying to, as much as you guys can, balance out the invasive species, humans not included in that. But there's a lot of that kind of. Say it again?
I might include those.
Yeah, right, exactly. So. But talk a little bit about that battle too, because your house abuts up against a canyon, and then you want to provide access to these canyons, and so that means parking lots and meters and trails and maintenance of trails. And like, I'm always shocked, and you and I have talked about this, I'm always shocked when you're walking along some trail and it's gorgeous and it's secluded and shaded, and all of a sudden there's a man-made significant bridge to get over a gully. We talked about the aluminum bridge you moved, and the logistics required, how expensive it is to put this bridge in a place where, or like out in Anzo Borrego, if you hike out to the to the Palm Oasis out there, there's a lot of big rocks that have been moved to create a stairway that's miles long. Like, that is not easy work. That's backbreaking. If they had an ATV this is hard work. So talk a little bit about balancing the use as well as the preservation.
Well, and it's really important to know, like, if you don't, we have a dual mission, and part of the mission is, to protect and restore and the functionality of these ecosystems and habitats, and making sure wildlife movement happens and all that kind of stuff. But on the flip side, we also, one of the conservation values that we need to move forward is connecting people to these areas so they will support the areas. So if there's a threat to the areas, they're there to be that community constituency, to be like, no, this is important, we need these to be here. So that's really, really important. And there are many ways to do that. Some of the ways are, you develop infrastructure systems like trails and bridges and destination locations and, signage and all that kind of stuff, where you're getting people out there to experience it and appreciate it and support it. And that's really a critical key to have, because if there's no one to support it, anything can happen. So we've worked really hard over the last 15 years or so to to put in a lot of that infrastructure and really make it, we call it visitor experience, make the visitor experience high quality, so that when they come out there, they behave in respectful ways, and to do that. And on the flip side, we have to balance that. I mean, we have like 3.5 million people in Orange County, and then and they can literally love it to death, for real. So we're trying to balance this stuff all the time, and there are different ways that we do it. And here's some of the ways. Like, some of the landowners have areas that are open to 7-day access for public to go. Most of the time it's like sunrise to sunset kind of stuff, where it's during the day, because they want to give reprieve at night for wildlife movement. They got to hunt, they got to forage, they got to do all that kind of stuff. So they're trying to give the nighttime hours to the wildlife, and then the human access during the day. Now, there's other landowners who have part of their preserves open 7 days a week, and then other areas are closed most of the time, and we actually do what is known as guided access. We do special activities where we have highly trained volunteers that guide programs into there, and they're giving education and all that kind of stuff. And it's mainly due to highly sensitive species or resources that are in the area. And then we have other areas that are deemed as nature preserves, and they are almost all guided activities, bringing people into these locations, with the exception of sometimes we have like a wilderness access day that'll be a Saturday. It'll open from like 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. and it's self-guided. You can you can hike it, you can run it, you can ride your mountain bike. If you have a horse, you can bring your horse, all that kind of stuff. And so we're really balancing the human desire to recreate and get immersion into nature and nature appreciation with the needs of the ecosystems and the functionality of these ecosystems, and wildlife movement, foraging, all these kinds of things. And we take it what's known as an adaptive management approach. We're always studying what's going on all the things that we do. There's a research component that goes to it, and we ask management questions. We apply we do the research, we get these answers, and then we adjust our management actions and or questions to move things forward. And a really simple example of this, we had there's an area in Limestone Canyon, It's known as the Sinks. It's a geological formation. It looks like a mini Grand Canyon kind of thing. And we have wildlife cameras that we're monitoring the wildlife in there. And we get a mama mountain lion with 3 baby cubs, that are just born. She's showing up on the cameras. We have all these activities that are scheduled to go to this area. We rerouted them. We sent a message to all the people that are registered for the activity to say, we need to move this activity because of this, because there's a mama mountain lion with her cubs. She needs some time before people start coming into that area. And most people are like, that's fantastic. That is awesome. So we take them and reroute them into other areas or other destination locations. And that's, again, the public constituency is supportive of that because they're being educated. They, will sometimes, show them a photo or whatever. And they're like, that's really cool. We didn't know that this is right here in our backyard, which is cool.
Yeah, it is cool. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because talking about all of this stuff, it sounds like you must have a huge staff. I mean, you've got 40,000 acres to manage in different sites, and some of it's hard to get to. I mean, how many people run this thing? Is it 200 people? 100 people?
That's a really good question. Again, we work in partnership with public agencies. So there are some staff within these public agencies that help support what we're doing. Not a lot. A lot of them have outsourced much of the work to us. Like we don't do law enforcement. So rangering is definitely something that comes from the public agencies and there's support on the resource management end of things and that kind of stuff. But for our organization, we have about 50 people, about 50 employees. But we do a lot of different things. So if you're looking at our organization, we do habitat restoration work. We do what's known as plant materials, which means we're doing habitat restoration work at such a large scale. There wasn't enough plant materials on the retail market that we needed, either plants themselves or seeds, that there wasn't enough to do what we wanted to do. So we actually have a native plant farm where we farm seed to do this large scale habitat restoration work. We also do, obviously public outreach and recreation and interpretive programs. We do that. We do fire prevention, which is, oh my gosh, it's such a big deal right now. We do all these different, we do a lot of monitoring. Again, I talked about research that we do. We are constantly doing research and monitoring the results of what our actions are to see if they're good or bad. And so these people, a lot of these people that work for us are in these various categories of work that we're doing. On the flip side, we also have a whole team that does that infrastructure build we were talking about, trail building, bridges. They're building 40-foot bridges, 10.5 miles down a single track, in the middle of nowhere. And you get there and you're like, what the heck? Like, where did this come from?
How did you get this concrete in here?
They brought it in piece by piece, bag by bag. So, and in some cases, we helicopter it in. We helicopter everything to the site, drop it in, and that kind of stuff. So there's a whole crew that does that. But then we also have, on another end of that, is we do volunteers in a massive way. Again, it's part of our developing the community constituency to support these lands. We have, so within certain areas that we manage, we have 500 active, highly trained volunteers, and there's a whole slew of volunteer jobs that they can get trained on, and they help to run this stuff. And they're integrated into everything that we do. And then beyond that, the county, the OC Parks county system, who we are heavily engaged with, they asked us to run their help run their volunteer program throughout the rest of the park systems throughout the county. There's another 1,500 highly trained volunteers in that system, and some of them bridge between the two different programs that we have going on. And these are people from the community that have invested their time. We invest training, we uniform them, we teach them all they need to know, and then they become extensions of our organization. They lead activities. They help us with restoration work. They help us with monitoring work. They help us with fire prevention work. They help us with, our farm is one of the, it's actually become a community asset because so many volunteers get involved there that they then lead general public activities for general public volunteers to come in. So from a volunteer standpoint, we create exponentially large amounts of volunteerism in Orange County. And if, when we're talking to the landowners, like 1 hour of volunteerism in the state of California is worth almost $31. And so last year, I think we produced, almost 15,000 hours of volunteerism. So if you start looking at the money these landowners are investing in the activities that we're doing and the programs that we're doing, the rate of return is massive. And these are, these are then volunteers who, become representatives in the community, and they also become donors. They start donating more than just their time.
That many man hours is basically 7.5 man years of work, of labor being donated at $31 an hour. Holy shit.
It's mind boggling. And the model that we do, we've really established a volunteer management model that is super efficient. We try to automate as much of the data collection stuff as we possibly can. And that allows you to focus on the care and feeding of volunteers, on things like training and volunteer recognition and all of that kind of stuff, where you need volunteers, you need to have the touchy-feely with volunteers. It's really important for maintaining that community and the relationships between our organization and them. And I think that we've learned how to build the program to focus that stuff where we need it, and really automate the data intake and data collection as much as possible, which then allows us to do reporting and that kind of stuff. So we've created a really good model. In fact, Orange Coast District of California State Parks just hired us this last year to help them build their, the strategic, program for them to manage their volunteers throughout the whole Orange Coast District in Orange County. So we do a lot more. Again, we have a dual mission. You have the ecological stuff, and then you have the community stuff, and we do both, bringing it together.
There's just so much stuff that you guys have to get accomplished. It's incredible. I mean, like when I think about curfews for park use, because I'm a dick, I'm like, fuck these guys, not giving me access.
You're not a fence jumper, are you?
Yeah. It occurs to me that these animals that I'm so desperate to preserve need this time to recoup, recover, hunt, whatever. I never think about that, and that's why I love having you on, because it corrects my vision on how these things. Because I'm desperate to have these mountain lions survive, and these all these different elements of this ecosystem that you don't need to manage because they are a system already. But you have to get out of their way. You have to allow them to. I mean, if we're going to build homes right up in their home, we got to allow them to have something. The other thing too is because of where we live, wildfires, and what people don't understand about the wildfires here. And let me just say this about Orange County is, yes, there's a lot of fires. There always has been. There's always going to be fires. But we also time this with our high wind season, and so like these fires are fed by an enormous amount of energy. And so they quickly get out of hand, and then you guys got to come in and do whatever it is that you do. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys, prevent horrible fires and manage, because we need fires too. I mean, fire is part of nature, and it cleans out things that need to be cleaned out.
Yeah, I'll go back a little bit and talk about where we live, and then we'll go to the fire stuff. So in Southern California, we live in what's known as a Mediterranean climate zone. And we're talking mainly the coastal areas of Southern California, like not the desert regions. It's the mountains to the beach. And it's actually a really rare place in the entire world. It only occurs in 5 places around the world. You're talking, Central California into Baja, Mexico, Central Coastal Chile, South Africa, Southwest Australia, and around the Mediterranean Sea. And these areas, what makes them so unique is it's the relationship between the ocean and the mountain ranges, and it creates these microclimates and that allow for massive amounts of biodiversity. In fact, we rival tropical rainforest for biodiversity. We just have our stuff's really small compared to a rainforest, which is very, very large. But we're one of the most biologically diverse areas in the entire planet. In fact, I think Mediterranean climate zone covers 1% of the landmass in the world, and it contains 20% of the plant species in the world. So from that standpoint, it's really, really important. The other thing, they're considered biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspot is a really diverse area that is also under threat of various things. And one of those threats is development, human, urbanization, all of that kind of stuff. Well, in Southern California, we have, you're talking about these coastal sage grub ecosystems and the chaparral ecosystems. And these are ecosystems, that that function on a cycle, just like any other, right? You have springtime where things grow, you have all this kind of stuff. Well, for our ecosystems here, they don't go dormant during the winter like other areas around the United States. They go dormant during the summer when it's really damn hot. So they're adapted to do that. They go dormant, they basically dry out, they look dead, they're not, but they look that way. Then you come in the fall, right? And in the fall, starting in October, is when we historically have our Santa Ana wind season. And it's a weather event that occurs every single year. It's predictable. It used to only go October, November. Now, because of climate change, it's going October, November, December, and sometimes into January. So it's expanding. But you take the dormancy of summer, you add in one of these Santa Ana wind events, which generally includes high winds, 40, 50 mile an hour. Sometimes the last fire we had a couple weeks ago was 80 mile an hour winds. Your humidity levels are down in the single digits. The temperatures tend to be high for the most part. And all you need is one single ignition and you have a catastrophic wildfire on your hands. And the one thing that has changed over time, in Southern California right now, 98 to 99% of wildfire ignitions are human caused. We don't really get lightning storms. So as the urbanization has increased, the ignition frequency has increased. Now, if you are talking about, a normal day, a spring day or whatever, and a fire breaks out, the fire, departments will come in and they do a really good job containing, controlling, putting it out, not heavily. You throw wind into the mix, the high humidity, or the low humidity, the high temperatures and wind, and literally the fire department tries to get out of the way. They try to preserve properties and they do what they can do. But when you have fires that are spotting 2 to 3 miles ahead of their fire line, it's super difficult to manage. And so we have this situation that is going on where we're seeing an increase in ignitions because of urban development. You're seeing the increase in the Santa Ana wind situation in the fall after the summer dormancy. And it's just a recipe for disaster. And so, yes, these ecosystems are fire adapted, and yes, they do need to burn. They should burn about every 100 to 150 years. Right now, the average cycle is 7 to 10. And the problem with that, so we're an environmental organization, right? What are we doing? Why are we concerned about fire? Well, fire comes in, let's say it burns, right? You got a mountain or a valley that burns, and you're like, okay, rain comes, it recovers. There's definitely an impact from that. You're going to see, the density of the vegetation is less and all that kind of, sorry, my dogs are here. But it grows back and it burns again in 5 years or 7 years. So then you start to see the reduction of that vegetation. And in the meantime, non-native plants start coming in and invading those spaces that are now available. And most of those non-native plants are annuals. They'll grow, like mustard is a big problem for us. Mustard grows 7 feet tall in one season, dries out. It's super thick. It's all over the place, and it's ready to burn again each year. So it's called habitat type conversion. And the fire is the number one driver of that. So we're looking to do habitat restoration work. Fire is actually doing the opposite to us. We're trying to plant plants and make things diverse, and fire's like, nope, screw you. I'm going to burn you, and I'm going to burn you again. I'm going to burn you again. I'm going to burn you again. And the habitat's just like, I can't recover fast enough. And the invasives are like, yep, there's space for me to be there, and I'm going to take over. So it's this weird cycle that we live in. And that's why, we're pushing for a lot of things. In Southern California, we know humans are the number one cause of fires. We also know where the hot, like the channel areas of where these things happen all the time. The fires happen in the same places over and over and over again. And most of the ignitions are coming from the same locations over and over and over again. So what we've done, our first thing in trying to prevent the fires is we have a volunteer fire watch program. When there's a Santa Ana wind or red flag day, we have highly trained volunteers that are, they're bright neon vests. They got fire watch magnets on their cars. They're trained for reporting. They do all, and we send them out on the sides of these roads or on these urban edges where we know historically there are fires. What we want to do is reduce those ignition sources during these Santa Ana wind events, and that reduces the amount of catastrophic wildfires that occur. And we do it all over Orange County. We're not always successful. We had 2 fires in the last month, big ones. And unfortunately, most of those were caused by, power infrastructure. And one came actually from a home. It was a house fire that spread into the wilderness areas. But, we're doing what we can do. The other things we really are looking at now is we're really talking up in Sacramento to some of the, the legislature to say, you got to treat Southern California different than Northern California. They have forested ecosystems. They have lightning strikes. They have all that kind of stuff. We need to be looking at a reduction of ignition sources during these Santa Ana wind events. We also need to be hardening the urban edges so that if fire does happen in the urban areas or on the side of a road, it doesn't spread into the wildland areas. Like car fires are on the side of a road, light the brush on fire on a routine basis. So how do we develop things that create barriers between that happening and getting into the wilderness area? So road hardening is one of our real things that we need to do. Habitat restoration along the urban edges is something else where we may end up doing large scale, cactus scrub instead of some of the other species of vegetation that goes in there. And the idea is you reduce or eliminate the fires from getting from an urban area into the wilderness, because it's devastating. And it's devastating when you get a catastrophic fire. It's devastating to the communities. We're fortunate in Orange County. We just had a fire that came into Irvine. They didn't lose any homes at all, but wow, there are many other areas that lost hundreds and hundreds of homes. So, it's one of those crazy situations. And I think we as a community need to look at it and solve the issue. And in all the research we've done, it's about ignition sources and particularly during these select weather events, and you could dramatically reduce the catastrophic wildfires. That's what we believe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Smokey the Bear has been telling us for a long time, only you can prevent forest fires. And it's such a crazy thing. And I don't want to, pick any one person out, but it's simple stuff like gender reveal parties that cause a fire, or a campfire that you could have swore you put out that does it, or, all the standard things, the cigarette butt that flicked out the window. My brother got into a one car accident. He spun out and went down into like this ravine, all brown grass. If he had driven, and he had just gotten into his car, so the car wasn't all the way warmed up. But can you imagine, like, if he had driven 5 more minutes? Because the car's low, it's a Camaro, and the only thing that would have really been damaged would be his car would have gone up in flames. But I mean, it's just that easy. He just got a little squirrely on the road.
Even the catalytic converters, that's, again, it's an air quality thing, right? It's supposed to be cleaning the air of the stuff, but inside it's got this honeycomb of ceramic that gets up to super high temperatures, and that parking on dry grass, that can ignite the grass underneath your car. Or some vehicles, when it fails, it shoots these shards of super hot, ceramic into the bushes on the side of the road, and you'll see 7-8 ignitions along a roadside. And so these are all, most of the fires that are occurring from the urban edges are unintentional. Now, there are arsonists. They do exist. In fact, in 2007, we had a fire in Santiago Canyon that was an arson fire. It was, someone threw out an incendiary device into the shrubs off the side of the road, and it went off during a Santa Ana wind event, and it burned 28,000 acres. So the whole idea of the fire watch, the people, the wearing your vest and looking at people, is a visual deterrent to arsonists, right? Because they're taking notes. They're, what vehicle was here, who was doing what, was there any suspicious behavior? But the other thing is you engage the public when they're doing things that can accidentally start a fire, and they just don't know. Pulling your grass over. There's a horse ranch in one of the areas. People like to stop on the side of the road and pet the horses. Well, they're parking in shrubs and grass, and that could light the place on fire. So our people go out and then engage them and educate them and say, hey, can you please move, park over there, or do this? So a lot of community efforts can be done. But I think there's also, it's time for large agencies such as Caltrans or the Transportation Corridor agencies or things like that can start investing some funds in really trying to prevent fire from coming from roads or even urban edges, things like that. So there's a lot of work to be done in that field.
It sounds like it. I mean, It's remarkable to me, all of the things that you have to pay attention to for an area. Would you say, is your preserve especially large, or is it average size? I mean, how do you?
It's large for the urban area that we're in, right? So, I mean, it's, if you compare it to, Yellowstone or, things like that, stuff up in the Sierras, it's not as big as those places. But you're talking about urban wildland areas where, they're super important locations because of the species diversity, from a global standpoint. But yet they're surrounded by massive urbanization. Like if you're looking in Southern California, the next comparison is the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area up in Malibu. And we're similar to that. So, and there's multiple landowners, you got state parks, you got county, you got cities, you got, all these different agencies that own all this stuff. And we're just trying to look at it from the 50,000 foot level and make sure everything gets managed properly as one giant system instead of individual owner systems. So there's challenges all over the place. That's another really important thing for us, though, is partnering. We partner with everybody. If you look at our habitat restoration work that we're doing, it's funded by the Orange County Transportation Authority because they passed Measure M, which was a 0.5-cent sales tax to expand the transportation system. But in order to expand the transportation system, they have environmental impacts. They have to mitigate those impacts. So they do it in two ways. You buy land and you preserve it, like we talked about earlier with conservation easements or natural communities conservation plan, or you restore habitat that's already been preserved but is degraded. And so they fund several. We have 4 projects funded by them that are, we do large scale projects. So they're sub watershed levels. You're talking 100+ acres on each project, and which is why we had to do the whole plant material thing, because we couldn't get enough seed to do what we wanted to do. So we grew it ourselves. So they fund it. We also, OC Waste and Recycling. They manage all the landfills. The urbanization comes with trash and recyclables and all that. So they have landfills, but they also have to mitigate the impacts of those landfills. So they fund us to do habitat restoration work. So partnering with these different agencies, we're doing work in Chino Hills State Park that is funded by Caltrans because something happened with Caltrans. They impacted the park. Caltrans had to mitigate those things. So it's partnering with all these different agencies and all really focusing on the same goals of meeting the mitigation needs while still doing ecosystem functionality level habitat restoration work. So, and that's actually a really interesting part of our job too. When we first started, a lot of the habitat restoration that was done was, to get approval from U.S. Fish and Wildlife and California Fish and Wildlife, they literally required like 100% native plant cover for like 10 years. And then they'd sign off on it and everyone would walk away and it would immediately go back to 70-30, 70% natives, 30% non-natives. And what we wanted, and it was super expensive. It was like $55,000 an acre, right? To do this stuff. And so what we approached them with is we wanted to do more landscape level stuff. We wanted to give us the $55,000 an acre, but let's push that over 100 acres and let's automatically acknowledge that our goal is 70% native cover, 30% non-native cover. Obviously, we want to do more than that, but our real goals are ecosystem functionality, diversity of species. And we're talking species, everything from, the different type of ant species all the way up to the birds, to the, the mammals like the mountain lions and everything in between, reptiles and amphibians, all that. And then, so it's diversity of plant species, diversity of wildlife species, and then the functionality of that ecosystem. Are things reproducing? Are things, are we seeing an increase in these endangered species? It took us many years to get the wildlife agencies to actually agree to those terms. And then once we've done it, they actually have been very successful habitat restoration sites. And the agencies actually really like it, to the point that both the state Fish and Wildlife and the federal Fish and Wildlife have brought their senior management and senior staff to these sites to tour them around as examples of how it should be done all over the place. So it's pretty cool. I feel pretty, that's some pretty good accolades for us, that we're taking the scientific approach and ecological approach, and it's about the functioning of the system, not just, it has to have 100% native plants on it. So, because it doesn't guarantee the functionality. And especially if it's only this big, you want something that's huge that functions as a system. So we've changed some some of the game, and that feels good.
Yeah. You just talked for half an hour straight, and I was just like learning the whole time. That is nothing compared to like the distinct knowledge you have when we go out and you're like, that's this bush, that's that bush, that's this bush. And one of the stories I love to tell my friends is like how little we know about our environment. We were all out on a nature walk and you're explaining all these things, and you saw a lady who was snipping off thistle or, some kind of natural artichoke thing or whatever.
Yeah, I remember this.
I'm getting rid of an invasive species. And you're like, hell, and you were the sweetest guy. You're like, actually, what you're doing is making my job hard. And you didn't say my job, but you were the best at explaining this. Like, this person's trying to do the right thing, but doesn't have the right kind of knowledge. And, you're just like, hey, this is fantastic. What a great effort you're doing. However,
yeah, because there are thistles, right? There's a bunch of different thistles that are invasives. There's artichoke thistle, there's milk thistle, Italian thistle, star thistle, a whole bunch of these different ones. There's one native thistle called cobweb thistle, and it's a really cool plant. It's got this big purple flower on it. It's got looks like spider webs all over it, and that was the one she was cutting. And I'm like, yes, cutting artichoke thistle is great. Here's cobweb thistle and what it looks like and how it is. And here's artichoke thistle. Cut that one. Don't cut that one.
Yeah.
I mean, we farm artichoke thistle, trying to get more seeds and more plants in the wild.
Yeah.
Her intent was good.
Right. Well, and that's you want to encourage behavior. You just want to correct it in a way that, and everybody's so easily offended these days. You did a great job of making the correction. Because I easily could fall into the same trap. Oh, I heard you're supposed to cut thistle. I'm going to go out there and every day cut thistle, and you're like, please stop.
Yeah. And it's a little weird because you get the weed warriors that want to come out and they think they know, and that's one of the reasons for our volunteer program, we do extensive training. We make these people experts in the field, and so that if someone's really interested like that, they could join our volunteer program and they would get an education that would blow their minds, and then they would go out there and be like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing and I'm doing it right. And we promote a lot of that. And she's a typical candidate for us of like, hey, I see you have interest in this. Let us help you. Let us help you understand this more and make sure you're more effective. So
yeah, because you're truly part of the community and you're trying to invest. Your intention is to invest to make the help that balance, that 70-30 balance.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, this is sort of an oxymoron, but are there good invasive species where like this actually is something that's good for our environment? And then why is mustard such a problem? I know like from Melaleuca trees from the Everglades, they're like, we're going to dry this out and we're going to, do all these things. And then now that they're there, you basically, it's $1 million a tree. It's got to be to get these things to not grow. And you never get rid of them. You have to ring them. And then you just have these dead sticks sticking out of the ground.
Yeah. So in invasive species, the challenge that we have, there's a lot of them. So, and where do you start, right? Like, you got this list, 100 different invasive species there. So what we do is we look at the list and we prioritize what is the most invasive, like what is going to do the most damage or take over or things like that. Mustard is a really good example. The problem with mustard, it's everywhere. You're never getting rid of it, which is why we went to the 70-30 thing. As soon as you walk away from 100% native cover, it's going to get some invasion of something, right? So, but what mustard does is it grows and it produces massive amounts of seed. It has chemicals inside the plant that actually deter other plants from growing underneath it. And it takes over areas and creates a monoculture instead of a diverse ecosystem. So you get these areas where literally it is the only species that's there. And that then has ripple effects because it doesn't support the other species of bird life or reptile life or whatever it is that you need for that biodiversity to occur. So that's why mustard is bad. Not to mention the flammability of it once you get dried out 8-foot stalks every year, and it's a sea of mustard as far as you can see. So mustard is bad. But there are, you have invasive species, invasive plants. There's invasive animals as well, but we have invasive plants that are super aggressive. Like Sahara mustard is one of our top ones right now. We actually have a program that we work amongst many of the partner groups that we have or different agencies and landowners. It's called Early Detection Rapid Response. And we have highly trained people that literally, they go out for days on end and they just walk and they identify where they are. And then we immediately come in and attack it. And because they are such highly invasive plants, that if we don't keep them under control, they will take over everything. And so, because we're a Mediterranean climate zone, we're super mild. Most things are like, oh yeah, I can live here. This is fantastic. Just like all the people living here, right? It's great. And so they take over. Most of it gets moved in off of like, heavy equipment like road graders or, different work that goes on. A lot of historical ones came in through like cattle feed and things like that. So that's where a lot of these things come from. There are some, when you're looking down your list, you have highly invasive ones that are high top priority. We spend probably, hundreds of thousands of dollars on invasive plants. It's crazy the amount of money we spend on this. But you have the ones that you're targeting. Then you have other ones that are like less problematic, some of the brome grasses and things like that. And there are other ones like there's one called tree tobacco, and it's not, it's an invasive, but it's not going to totally swallow an area. And the hummingbirds really like them. So they're like, when you go after them, some people, like bird people, are like, don't take those out. And you're like, yeah, but it's not really supposed to be here. And so, yeah, you get some conflicts, and some have beneficial qualities. Each one of these species just fills a niche that's there. And, some of them are just more prolific, and some of them, that niche didn't exist, so it popped up there. And, then they get spread through wind or through bird poop or through whatever it is. The seeds, coyote runs by and the brome grass puts the little burrs in their fur and it falls off somewhere else and starts growing. That's how plants move.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, some are super high priority species and others are, they're okay. You let them do their thing. And for us, when we do the habitat restoration work, our theory is if you get that coastal sage scrub or chaparral habitat mature and thick enough, it will outcompete the non-natives, and it'll shade them out. It'll kind of, that's why when a fire comes and it burns back all those native species and, literally wipes off like a moonscape, they'll grow back from crown sprouting because they have such deep tap roots. But in the meantime, you open up all of that dirt and area to sunlight and moisture, and invasives are like, oh yeah, I'm in, and they grow faster than the natives. So that's how the competition happens. So you have this constant like war going on between natives and non-natives. And if you look at historical aerials year after year after year, you can see the battle line kind of moving. I know you're a military guy, so it's like, okay, the battle went this way, and then something happened. Oh, the battle line came back this way. And if you watch the aerials year after year after year over 100 years, you can see it. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah, all that stuff is interesting. That competition for that ground space. And then, is this a common approach, or like, are you guys unique? Is California unique? I mean, there are so many places where like you're fighting this fight in your little tiny part of the world, but if the neighbor preserve doesn't do their job, you're like, well, like you're just making my job. Do you guys work in concert?
You have to. So I'll give you a good example. We're doing this large scale habitat restoration site on West Loma Ridge, in the lower Santa Ana Mountains, and the toll road kind of goes right through the area. And there's this, the Transportation Corridor Agency has a fence line that goes like this, and inside that fence line was a sea of artichoke thistle. And literally on the other side of this wire fence is our habitat restoration site. And we're like taking out all the non-natives, and we're putting in seeds, and we're planting, and we're doing all that kind of stuff. But yet the source of our problem is literally on the other side of the fence. We see it, we're looking at it. So yeah, we end up calling the Transportation Corridor Agency and Caltrans, who does the management, and we're like, hey, give us a permit, let us get in there, we'll take care of it. We'll go in and remove these things and start addressing the situation. And so you have to partner with things. Another good example, on one of the 20,000 acre units, one side is owned by the city of Irvine, one side is owned by OC Parks at the County of Orange, and one side is owned by the Crystal Coast State Park. And it's one, the people don't really know the difference. The animals and plants don't know the difference. They're imaginary boundaries. Well, if we're in the city of Irvine, if we're going after all these invasive species and we're, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars removing them, but the state or the county's not participating in that as well, they just keep blowing over the hill. The seed sources keep flowing from the other side of the hill. So yeah, we have to work in concert with other agencies, and we actually pride ourselves on being partners with a lot of these groups. In fact, I sent you information earlier. We have a website, which is irconservancy.org. It's our Irvine Ranch Conservancy website, and that's about our organization. But we have another website called letsgooutside.org. And the whole premise of that other website is partnerships. We offer, public activities on that website, hundreds of them, not, we're in COVID right now, so everything's kind of, but normally we offer hundreds of them a quarter. Well, so does the other landowners. So, and other nonprofits who are also supporting us. There's Laguna Canyon Foundation. There's, the Upper Newport Bay Conservancy. There's all these other groups that are similar to us that are helping support all of this movement as well. And this is an outlet where they can put activities as well, or information comes out about it. So we look at us, and then we look at the land, and we represent the land kind of on it as its own entity. And it's really important. And another thing I didn't mention, but the land in I think 2001, I think it was, got designated by the Department of Interior as a national natural landmark. And so when you look at the National Park Service, or the Department of Interior, national parks, national monuments, right, national recreation areas. Well, one of their smaller programs is the National Natural Landmarks. And you have to go through scientific review, and it's either geological or biological. It has to meet one of those criterias to become a national natural landmarks. And there's like 40 or 50 of them across the United States. Well, this one actually got it for both, because it's such a diverse place, and the geology is so important that, it's an honorary designation from the national, the federal government, saying this place is important to the people of the United States. And so it's the Irvine Ranch National Natural Landmarks. And then 2 years later, Governor Schwarzenegger made it the first California natural landmarks, which is kind of cool. They're just honorary designations, but it shows the value and the importance of these places from a biological and geological perspective, which is kind of cool. And again, that encompasses many landowners, many other nonprofits, all kinds of stuff.
How many stakeholders are there in your weird tent then? Because you've got federal assets, you got Fish and Game, you got all these people you've got to coordinate with. Is that one person's job? Just like I make phone calls every day and go to meetings. It's got to be 50 organizations.
Well, oh yeah, it's easy that. 'Cause, I mean, I've mentioned many. The big ones for us, obviously, you have OC Parks. They own huge amounts of the land that we work on, which is the County of Orange. City of Irvine is another big one. California State Parks is another big one. So those three from a landowner perspective, although, City of Newport Beach is a smaller one, but they're in there, and then you have other, then you have your regulatory agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, California Fish and Wildlife. There's Army Corps of Engineers. There's all depending on what you're doing as to where you end up going down this path. And then you have, obviously the funders, Orange County Transportation Authority, Caltrans, OC Waste and Recycling, other state parks. And then there's, a bunch of smaller nonprofits. And so, yeah, the list is long of who we work with on a daily basis. Now, usually these are all attached to different either program areas that we do or projects that we're doing. So it's not like one person is managing all of these relationships. These relationships are happening based on the work that we're doing. So it's, if you're a project manager with this, and if you're working at, doing a restoration project in Chino Hills State Park, you're obviously talking to them, and you're talking to the Caltrans people who are actually funding the project and managing that. But there's, other stuff too. Like there's just these weird endowments we get sometimes. Like we just got an endowment in Chino Hills State Park, where we're the recipients of money each year to make sure that the California gnatcatcher, which is a little bird that's endangered, gets taken care of. And it's this weird fund that goes to this bank, and then the bank sends it to us, and then we do the work. So you have all these different relationships going on all at the same time. So yeah, it's complicated. People always, they're like, "What do you do for a living, Dave?" And I'm like, "Oh, I run an environmental nonprofit." They're like, "Oh, you get to go play in the woods all the time. That's great." And I'm like, "You have no idea how complex this is." No idea. It's super complex. It's super, you got to report on stuff, and you got to make sure things are going well, and establishing community support. And from a career standpoint, it's been great. It's been a wonderful challenge. I've been able to build a lot of program areas. Like I'm responsible for our volunteer program, which is massive, but I built it originally, and I take great pride in that. I mean, I created when we first started, I was like, we need an environmental constituency in Orange County that is not necessarily the activist community, because the activists have a very distinct role. I just want people that are going to think about this place every day, give time and commit to it as, you know, part of what they do in their lives. And we built that, and it's pretty impressive.
That's remarkable. I talk all the time, you know, with Save the Brave, that's my charity.
Yeah.
We've reached the point where we can now give hats out for heads because we've collected enough heads. We still need money. We still need a ton of help.
Yeah.
We still, you know, want people to participate and get involved. But if you can build a community, you know, a lot of these tasks are small tasks, you know, and like, I don't have $30 an hour to pay you, but I need you to do this fairly small thing. If you're desperate to help, here's where I can use your help, you know, whatever it is.
And our business model actually allowed us to do a lot of this. Our business model right now we're a lot like a nonprofit hospital, right? Like we have service contracts or land management contracts with these public agencies. Mainly the big ones that we have are you know, the County of Orange OC Parks, City of Irvine, City of Newport Beach. Those are our 3 big land management contracts. And in those contracts are written and funds that are identified to generate volunteer support in the community. So that allowed us, instead of having to fundraise for that stuff, that allowed us a baseline to work off of it. It allowed us to, you know, create uniforming and create high level trainings and do the volunteer recognition things that you need to keep the volunteers engaged and all that kind of stuff. And it allowed us this platform to work off of. And it's been fantastic. And I think, you know, I get volunteers all the time that are like, you know, we've looked all over for other types of volunteer groups that are like you, and it doesn't exist. Like, you guys are rock stars, and I take a lot of pride in that, because I was the creator of that, and it's just something I've been very happy with my career. How, you know, I landed in this. It took a risk in this organization, because when we first started, here's where it gets weird. In the very beginning, we were actually funded by the Irvine Company, which was a major land developer in Orange County, to do environmental work, right? You see the conflict there? And so they set aside a bunch of land, you know, as part of it. They protected all of it, and then they threw some money at it. But the intention for them was like, we're going to throw, like, you know, investor money in it, but you got to figure out the long term. You know, we're not paying for this the whole time, which is fine. I mean, that's the way it goes. And so we built this organization. And, you know, we took the best of what the Nature Conservancy was doing before when they were here. We took some of the best business aspects of the Irvine Company. We blended them together, and we just, you know.
How do you guys stay
in
terms of wildlife, wild space management? I mean, does Irvine have a program at UC Irvine, or where do you guys get your academic cutting edge stuff?
There's a lot of schools, you know, like my peer, our Vice President and Chief Programs Officer, he's a Princeton PhD, right? And he's, you know, coming out of the ecology stuff. We get UC Santa Barbara has a lot of they have a master's program up there that we get a lot of people coming from. UCI has, you know, they have the Center for Environmental Biology at UCI, and they do a lot of their own research on these particular properties, because, like, if we need answers, they're doing their own research, but we also, like, we need answers, and we're like, hey, can you guys get, you know, an undergrad or a, you know, a grad student to do this research? And we're just looking for the answers, right? We just want to know information. And so we partner with them all the time. In fact, we're partnering with them more and more and more. We're starting to partner with them on some education stuff that's coming down the pipeline for, you know, community education and things. So academic wise, we're very attractive to people who are, you know, coming out of school or wanting an internship or things like that. So we've done a ton of it, and we have again, the way we're built, we have multiple kind of areas you can do it in. We've had, you know, UCLA interns on GIS stuff. We have a whole GIS lab. We have, you know, ecologists, you know, from some of these other places.
Here's my question. I got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
How long does it take to put all this stuff in your head so it's manageable, so you even understand the scope of it? And do you even know the scope of what you're doing?
No. So, I mean, I've been there since almost the very beginning of when our organization was developed. And so I was involved in a lot of the strategic planning of the organization. and the evolution of it over time. So I've been around, I've been around a long time in this organization, and I really know what we're doing and where we're. And when we started, it was like a startup. In fact, I've stepped in and had to do many of the jobs during the the build of the place, and so I'm very familiar with that, and it just I've lived it, so it's easy to talk about. It's harder if you're coming in from the outside and you're like, okay, wow, look at what we really do. People look at us, oh, you're the Irvine Ranch Conservancy, you do environmental stuff, but no, you take a look at what we really do, and we do a massive amount of work, and it's in many subjects. And that blows people's minds. I sent you that 15-year report, and it blows people's minds on what we actually do, because most people are only touching pieces of us.
Right.
Oh, yeah, you guys do habitat restoration. Yep, we do. Oh, by the way, did you know we do this and this and this and
You've
this?
got a three-dimensional matrix organization with multiple input and output products and things that you need. And again, every time we talk about it, I'm just so impressed with what you guys do. If you're shitty at it, then goddamn, what does it take to be great at this? I mean,
and that's one thing we've really strived to do. I think, in the beginning, it was we were always trying to strive for higher standards of excellence. And that's, that came out of, some of our DNA, like the Irvine company, that yes, they're a developer, but they do damn good work, and they're always striving to be top notch. And so we're like, we should be like that, just in the environmental world. And so, we've done that. Now there are other people, there's private companies that do this do pieces of what no one does all of the things that we do. In fact, that's part of, the county would go out for, we do have these long-term 10-year management agreements, and they go out on the street, like it goes out on the street with a request for proposals, and we have to respond to it just like anybody else. But what they're asking for, we meet almost all of it, where a lot of other groups have to piece things together to try to meet the proposal needs. So we've been fortunate in how we built our organization, that when we first built it, we stepped back and we said, if we're going to do this, what are all the needs that have to be there? And we identified those, and we had think tanks with people from the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy and Santa Monica Mountains, the people who are doing the same type of work we're doing, and they came down and had this think tank, and they're like, here's the outline of what you guys should look like. And so we went from there and we built it, and that is kind of how it goes. In fact, when we first started, there was a lot of question of what are you actually going to do? Are you going to just do fundraising, or are you going to do this? And the landowners came back and said, no, we need management help, all on the ground. And so we're like, all right, I guess we're going to do that.
Yeah.
But
okay, I got a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
Do you get to go outside enough, or is by the nature of what you guys do in the shop there, are you guys kind of pinned to a desk and not able to do what you truly love to do?
I do not go out as much as I would like, or I used to. I used to go out a lot. But running the business that is now, a mid-sized company, and managing all these things, it doesn't always allow it. Generally, I get to go out when we're doing VIP tours, or sometimes I'll jump on, I try to jump on projects with staff. They're out all the time. They're awesome, and it's great. And sometimes I try to jump on projects and help them out, just because it's good to interact with your staff and that kind of the building the bridge in Laguna Coast Wilderness Park, where we took it in several miles, and I worked several days on that project, and it was awesome. It was great. You get to build a bridge in a remote area. It's awesome.
I know. I love it. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, but it's for me, in the position I'm in now, it's kind of the tragedy of you work your way through your career and you love this, but what I'm doing now is really important to support this happening. I don't get to do this anymore, but if I don't do this, none of that's going down. So I feel good about that, but I don't get out as much as I.
And then, okay, so a couple of things. The controls, right, of the machine. And so let's say if you could adjust one behavior from the civilians who consume the space, what's one thing you would love to see? If you guys could do 10% less of this, it would be awesome.
Unauthorized trails are a big problem.
Okay.
Because you get people who are like, I've been on this trail 100 times, I want to go that way, and they create their own trails, and that just opens the vector for non-native plants to come in, right? And it fragments the habitat, and it creates people coming into areas and all that kind of stuff. So I think being more conscious about their personal impacts on the environment, and including don't go off trail, don't cut trails, don't all that kind of stuff would be a big deal. Because again, we're talking about urbanized ecosystems that are islandized, and someone makes that impact and it's not easy to recover from it. And then you throw 1.5 million people on the trails a year.
Yeah,
we've seen trails that go from like this and over a 5-year, because monitoring trails is part of what we're doing as well. And what is that human impact? And the trail becomes 8 feet wide,
Right.
And you're like, that is impact to the habitat, and that's that's a problem. So
okay, now let's go external. If you could get help or better partnership from, and I don't want you to call anybody out specifically, but are there agencies where you're like, if these guys understood what they're doing to make our job harder, or what they could do to allow us to be better, what are some things about that externally where you guys could use some help, either in terms of addition by subtraction or just more help from this organization?
I don't have any one that would do that. I think our biggest issue right now is, as you're probably aware, is fire prevention. Fire is a huge problem. It's a problem that seems to be getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And I think that there needs to be some serious funding applied to outside the box thinking right now. Like Cal Fire at this point in time is, and with the support of the governor, is really focusing on vegetation removal and fuel reduction. That's not our problem in Southern California. I can show you an area that had vegetation I can show you, we just had the 2 fires. I can show you it's a moonscape right now. If we get decent rain right now, it'll be covered in vegetation, probably non-native vegetation, and it's probably ready to burn next summer. So in these ecosystems, removing vegetation, if you don't have something to fill that gap, something will fill it, right? And so, and we've learned that through habitat restoration work. If you take out a bunch of non-native species and you don't put native species back, another non-native will show up and take its place. So you have to take these actions, and vegetation removal in these diverse ecosystems is not the answer at all. And I think that there for Southern California, there needs to be some money thrown at out of the box thinking in relation to the fire problem right now. That's what I think our biggest one is. There's obviously other stuff that there's a lot more stuff. I'd love to get a lot more philanthropy money as well that allows us to focus on things that are cool and important but aren't critical, right?
Philanthropy. Let's go. Come on. Chuck Norris, you got money. You live in Orange County. The other thing, my uncle worked for decades in U.S. forestry, and a couple things he said that I know will resonate with you is, you can only bend a trail so much, and people will cut across like the hip of the bend. Like you only can manage them in so many ways. So please stay on trails. They are designed. You guys know what you're doing. You're trying to balance things out, and when we provide imbalance, it makes it harder. He also said that politics, and I was surprised to hear this, politics gets in the way of good management of wild lands. He in particular was like, when the spotted owl thing came up, we were making decisions that weren't ecosystem based. It was based on one thing. And again, the balance got out of whack. Mm-hmm. We need to save owls. We need to preserve things. He's like, but all of that came at the cost of jeopardizing redwoods, which take 3,000 years to grow. Yeah. And are not easy to he's like, so politics can't get in the way of this science-based approach, but I'll be damned if politics aren't in the way all the time. We
work with politics all the time. I mean, you look at our public landowners, right? You have the county of Orem. So we're always, engaging the county supervisors. The city of Irvine is always engaging the city council, and, the city of Newport Beach is the same way. We're always trying to engage these public officials who, most of the time have the right intentions. They just don't have the background, and they change over so much that is a full-time job in itself. And there's another nonprofit agency that is a partner of ours. They're called the Natural Communities Coalition. They are the nonprofit facilitators of the Natural Communities Conservation Plan. And one of their main goals is to re-educate all the politicians that come in, because it's a revolving door. And this Natural Communities Conservation Plan was signed in 1996, and all those people are gone. They're not there anymore. So you got to keep re-educating these people so that they understand what all the agreements were. They understand what needs to be done. They understand, when we're having issues on how to support that. And, it's definitely a challenge, and it's an interesting field. I think Orange County has done pretty good with it. But it has taken a lot of work and a lot of partnership work to make sure it stays that way.
And then internally, what dial would you want to turn for you guys to improve what you guys do?
We just did a reorganization with our structure last year, and we're still kind of fine tuning all of that and fixing some, because you look at it, we started out really as a startup. And for years we functioned as a start, and you did whatever you had to do to make things happen and the work going on. And you were proposing these big giant projects and proposing these out of the box thinking. And then all of a sudden, we were given the opportunities to do it. We did it. It's working. Now people are interested. And so we've grown, we grew during the recession. We got bigger during the recession. And because we're we're an outsource from a Republican side, right? And with the environmental side for the Democratic side. So both parties like us. So we things happen for us on a regular basis. But during that growth, we found ourselves a mid-sized company, and it was time to relook at the next 10 years and what is our structure and is it going to work for us and on all of that. And I think we're in the kind of the final touches of, the next 6 months to a year of really building up our program areas with solid, support from teams on each one. And I think that's really, from an internal standpoint, that's where we're headed. And some of that requires, some funding and things like that. And we're just we're having to figure that out. How do we build these program areas to the full extent that we need them to be, to really push our mission forward in Orange County. So, and we're starting, we're not opposed to state, we do Chino Hill State Park, which is technically in San Bernardino County. So we're not just stuck to the Irvine Ranch, and we're not just stuck to Orange County. So.
Let me do a little bit of promoting here. So you guys can go to letsgooutside.org if you're in Orange County or going to visit Orange County. I mean, yeah, Disneyland's great. The beach is great. But I've been telling you, some of these canyons you won't believe that you're in a county with 3.5 million people in it when you go to these places. They are so far off the beaten path. So letsgooutside.org. You can also learn about the Irvine Conservancy at irconservancy.org. And just in general, I would encourage people to go outside in general. But if they do want to go somewhere and learn more about it, and I'm talking anywhere, because this show is worldwide. So if someone's like, yes, I want to get outside, I want to do it in a way that makes sense. If I need to snip the right thistles, great. What's a recommendation for people who are inspired now? What do they need to do no matter where they live?
Well, with the internet age, it's easy to find information on this stuff. There's no matter where you are, there's going to be some, either a public agency like, a Forest Service or somebody like that has information on places you can go, and we'll have trail maps and have all that kind of stuff, or, smaller conservancies, so it's easy to find stuff online, where you are, and make sure you know the rules and the regulations and think about why those rules and regulations are there, because they're there for a reason. We're not just, an ogre, we don't want you to come out here. We actually want you to come out there. We want you to participate. We want you to love it. We want you to contribute and be part of the solution. We want you to instead of being a user, be a partner, because a lot of people are I'm a user. Well, give back, offer some volunteerism or, do something.
Well, look, we just talked for an hour and 15 minutes on Christmas Eve. So one, thank you for doing that with me. Two, and I love to do this on the show because it really is important. From all of us out here in humanity, all 7 billion of us, thank you to you and all your crew for what you do, because you're doing a hell of a job. I've seen the product. And if you didn't do it, someone would have to do it anyhow. So yes, you enjoy it, but thank you for taking time to try to at least take this part of the earth and make it useful, make it manageable, make it, something better than what we tend to turn it into, because we are the most invasive species. So thank
Yeah,
you for
that is
all
true.
making this work and doing it for us.
Thanks for having me on here. This is great. I know we've been talking about it for a long time. Every time we go hiking or something, or we go camping.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
And now we're going to do another one and another one. I love it. And I know that people are going to appreciate how fascinating your job is and how important it is. I mean, saving the planet. Okay, great. That's just one tiny thing, like it's really neat to be able to share this time with you, Dave. And I appreciate you.
I appreciate you having me, man.
All right, stand by.